Hi, this is my second video on my best chess games. If you haven't seen the first one, you are welcome to. Actually, you might want to see this one first because it happened earlier in the tournament. It was round 3, I had 2 points, so I had a perfect score. And my opponent was Ricardo Cardoso. He was rated 1883 and I was rated 1826. So you can say that I would be happy to draw this game because it was the third round, I had a perfect score and I was playing someone higher rated than me. So the game opened with e4, I was playing white and I opened with my favorite e4 and we have g6, the modern defense. Okay, we transpose to a perk defense with f4. And here I already made a mistake. I played bishop c4, which, looking back at it, it's really a poor move. I mean, the bishop is vulnerable to this break, d5 and b5. And f7 is not really that weak, so I will never be able to explore it. Now, if my opponent plays b5, that would be my dream because I can play bishop takes f7 and after king takes knight g5 and now I win the bishop back. But of course my opponent didn't play it. He instead played bishop takes f3. And now I have to choose. I mean, he could have played knight f6 maybe, castles, d5, and I would say that maybe the position is equal, maybe black is a bit better, because this bishop here is kind of blocked by its own pawns, and this bishop is not particularly good piece. But okay, he played bishop f3, which is very good, because now if I take with a pawn, he can play like e5, threatening this check on h4, and okay, I might play bishop e3, e takes, and now queen h4, which is a bit annoying. Yeah, I think in this position black is probably better. So I took with the queen, which was my initial idea, to sacrifice the d4 pawn, and now I played f5, and this is really a bad move because I'm just giving him control over the e5 square, which is a really nice square for the knight, this knight in particular. Now my idea is to, let me get rid of these colors, my idea was to be able to attack this pawn on f7. That's why I played bishop c4 and took with the queen on f3 and played f5, but it's just not that good. I mean, black can play like knight f6 and he defends the pawn, but now this bishop can't go back, and that was my idea. But my opponent, after f5, took on f5, and now if I take with a pawn like this, well, there is not going to be pressure on f7 anymore, and he can play d5 immediately, and probably black is much better. So, well, yeah, I forgot to mention this. Instead of f5, I could have played knight e2, and this sets a little trap. If he plays the bishop to g7, I can play queen b3, and you can see that both pawns are attacked, and I'm getting my pawn back with a good position. So we should play, after knight e2, we should play bishop b6, and okay, bishop e2, I'm going to castle long and have some kind of leading development, which, okay, it's a slight compensation for the pawn. But again, after f5, It took with the pawn, and so I played bishop g5. My idea was that now I don't worry I'm pinning the e pawn, and so my opponent can play e6, because in this position, if I play like move like queen h5, it just takes my knight and plays d5, and black is completely winning. I think, at least that was my assessment at the time. And if I play queen f5, well, e6 and d5. So I tried to mix it up a bit with bishop g5. My opponent played queen a5, and I castled long. I mean, I need to show some compensation for the material I've sacrificed. And okay, took my knight, was not necessary, but always good to open my king. And now I played knight d7, which is a good move because the knight is coming to this weak e5 square. So I have to do something about it, but in this position I didn't really see what. I mean, I could play queen takes f5, and after that probably what would happen was queen takes, e takes, and knight e5, and you can see that I have a pair of bishops, but my pawn structure is terrible and I'm a pawn down, so I'm probably going to lose the game. Instead of that, well, maybe it was also a psychological factor. I know that my opponent likes to play actively, so I'm forcing him to play passively with this move bishop takes f7. Now, objectively, this move is bad because I'm giving up a piece and it's not that good, but I'm setting some problems for my opponent, at least practically, that he needs to solve. I mean, he needs to take the bishop, I think, and after queen h5, you already made a slight mistake. Probably you should play king g7, but instead played king f8, and now he is on this semi-open file, and okay, the king just gets really exposed. So we played king f8, and I played rook h f1. Now, yes, he needs to be careful because his king doesn't have a lot of squares to go to. He played queen takes c3, which is a good move, taking a pawn and defending this crucial f6 square, because I'm going to put a lot of pressure on that. So I took the pawn. He needs to move this knight. I mean, well, not this knight. If this knight goes to f6, then bishop h6 and king g8, rook g5 is mate. So he needs to move the other knight. Knight d f6. Of course, if king g7, rook f7 is always mate. So yeah, he has some troubles in this position because, as you can see, this knight doesn't have a square to go to. So this rook won't be developed for a while, and I'm a piece down, but I have some activity. Of course, black is winning, but my idea was just to set in some problems, and I managed to. I played rook d3, which is also not the best move, because I could just play rook f1 with the same idea as in the game, but I'm not giving the e4 pawn, and the e4 pawn might be useful in some positions. So I played rook d3, he just took my e4 pawn, and now I played rook f3. And okay, now he has a lot of choices. He could play like something like h6, but it's very difficult to find moves for black. I mean, how do you develop these pieces? This knight is in the way, you can't move this pawn, and so it's very hard to develop. And my opponent played queen e6, trying to gain some control over this pressure point on f6. And here I made a really good move, g4. My idea is that I want to take on f6 and play g5, but maybe I don't want to take with f6 with a bishop, So I'm delaying that option and playing g4, and in the next move I might play bishop takes f6 followed by g5. My opponent could have tried queen f7, and in this case I have two options. I can either go for queen h4, putting even more pressure on f6, or I can try bishop takes f6, and now if queen takes h5, bishop takes h8, queen takes f5, all forced, and here I'm 2 pawns down, but I'm gaining the h7 pawn, and probably I'm even slightly better because of these 2 pawns. I mean, if I had to take a side, I'd probably take white. But he ignored it and played a5, so I just took on f6 and played g5. Now, there is a variation I should have played, which is bishop h6, and this draws, because if he takes, I'm gonna take it. I mean, he needs to take it. And after king e8, I can play rook e3, and in the next move I'm gonna take this knight. And because the e-pawn is pinned to the king, I gained up this back, and I also retained some activity. So we probably should play king f7, but now I have the pleasant choice between queen h5 with a draw, or even g5, winning the piece back with very good chances. But okay, I did not see this variation and played bishop takes f6. And after pawn takes, I played g5, which was my idea. My opponent played king e7, which is not the most precise move, but okay, when you are defending, it's not really easy to find the best moves, at least in my view. So he probably didn't find the best moves, and okay, he just went back with the king to f8. He probably should just played knight takes f6 and give up the queen for 2 rooks, and here I think there is no chance white is going to win. But okay, he played king f8, and after queen g5, white is actually winning because of the threat of queen g7, followed by taking the rook. Okay, and after queen f7, I gave the game away with h4. I should have played rook g3, and now my idea is again to play queen g7 and queen takes h8, and if the queen takes on g7, then I can recapture the pawn, and after that I take on h8. Okay, for example, rook a6, queen g7, queen takes, pawn takes, check, and okay, white is completely winning. But I played h4 because I had the same idea. I saw that these two pieces are not moving, and so my idea was just to play h5, h6, and after that play queen g7, winning the rook. And I also had an idea in mind. I wanted my opponent to see this and play h6. Now I wanted it because now I can play queen g7, which is a pretty move because he needs to play king e8, and I take the rook and I'm completely winning, because if queen takes g7, then I take, and after this rook g3, king h7, and rook f7 is mate, and that is a very pretty mate. So that's why I went for h4, which is a bad idea because my opponent could have just played h5, or even maybe queen g6. And now after queen f4, okay, I'm threatening this pawn, but after rook e8, black is defending and he might get a chance to exploit material advantage. I mean, it's very imbalanced. White is a piece down and 2 pawns, but he's very active, but it's certainly a better try than just rook a6 like he played. And okay, I played h5, which is again a bad move, because I should have played again rook g3, but okay, h5 with the idea of h6. and my opponent played rook e6 check and rook b5. And now I played h6, following my idea, and now my opponent should have played queen g6. And after I take on b5 and play something like queen d5, maybe. Okay, I think chances are balanced. I mean, my pieces are more active, and the knight and rook don't move, but my king is also very weak, and this queen might be able to exploit it. And okay, maybe just take on c2 in this position. Okay, actually I think you can do it because queen takes d6 might win. I'm not sure. But okay, it was a better try than what he did, which was rook takes f5, and after queen g7 I'm, if not winning, much better. King e8 is forced, I take the rook back, and now knight takes f6. My opponent is going to give the rook back, he needs to. Now queen g7, with the idea of trading queens, but after king e6, okay, I don't want to trade queens because the king is coming to g6, so I play rook f3, and I'm threatening this little check, which wins the queen. My opponent played queen g6, and okay, I just repeated the position one time and played now rook g3. And after queen takes, rook takes. Now this ending is probably drawn, but I thought that I had some winning chances because this pawn is really advanced and my rook is very active. Of course, these pieces are also very active, but okay, that's probably why it is a draw. But my opponent played b5, king b2, c5, a4, which is a good move. I'm just splitting his pawns. He took a pawn, he could play b4, but now my king comes to b3, c4, b5, I start taking pawns. I might even go this way and take this pawn. So okay, he just wants to liquidate everything on the queen side, and okay, d5 is he's giving the pawns back, but he wants to liquidate the pawns on the queen side. Okay, king e4, and now I play rook f7. Rook f7 is a bad move, because if I play king d2, then my opponent is in Zugzwang, because what I played was rook f7, and my opponent played king f5, and after taking, he just gains the pawn back. If I had played king d2, he needs to move either the knight, and is giving me this pawn, or the king, and the only safe square for the king is d4, and now I play rook f7, and after king e5, the black king doesn't win this pawn. I'm not sure if this ending is winning for white, or if it is drawn. I think it's an interesting endgame. It's certainly better than what I played, but I think if you want to look at it in some detail and tell me if you found some plan to win with white, looking at it rather quickly, I didn't find a plan. It might be winning, but it's not that easy. I mean, for example, I can just go with the king, but knight g4 doesn't work. It's important because after these moves, he can't take my pawn because he loses his knight. But you can just play like king e6, and I'm not sure how to make progress in this position. So if you want to analyze it and find a winning plan for white, then I will be very thankful. So after rook f7, as I already showed, he wins the h6 pawn. If I play rook f8, trying to keep in touch with this knight, then he just plays knight g4 and wins the h6 pawn, and the king doesn't get cut off like in the game. So I played rook g7 and now rook g1. So this ending is drawn, of course, but because the black king is cut off on the h file, there are some problems. My opponent played knight h5. I mean, there's not much you can do. Knight h5, here it is. King e4, knight g7, and okay, I'm just moving around. And here I set my first trap. Because, no, it's not in this position, it's in this position. I set my first trap. Now, if the knight goes to h5, which is a blunder, I play rook g4. And again, black is in zugzwang, and he must give the knight. And white is winning. But my opponent didn't play that. King h5. You can say that in tennis language, my first service went into the net. So, king f6, h4, h5, which was not really needed. You could just play, okay, maybe knight h3 and hold the drawing position that I will show you later. But okay, h5 is also playable. I played king f5. And okay, this is my second trap. If he plays knight h3, I just play rook g2, and again, knight is lost. Black is in zugzwang and must give the knight. So he played knight e2, and now I win the h5 pawn. But okay, this is still drawn. My opponent played knight e4. He could have just played king f2. And after something like king e4, king e1, king e3, knight here, rook here. Okay, there is no way for white to make progress. This is a theoretically drawn position. Black is just going to play the knight here, and here, and here, and here. And there is nothing white can do about it. But my opponent was not familiar with the drawing technique, and that was good for me. Okay, knight e4 is still acceptable. I played king e4, knight f3, just going around. King g4 attacking my rook, so I can take his knight. Rook f2, and now the knight must go back to the king. My opponent was probably afraid that if he played knight f3, I was going to get some kind of king e3 or king e4 move, and maybe draw his king to the edge of the board here. But as I told you, that's acceptable as long as you keep your knight close to the king. My opponent played knight b3, and now he is losing. Because the knight is too far from the king, and I can win it. So I played king c4, attacking the knight, and nothing works for him actually. You can try to play, you play knight a5, but you can try to play knight c1, which loses immediately to rook c2. You can try to play knight a1, which loses immediately to rook a2. You can try to counterattack my rook, but after rook a2, the knight goes to c1, and again rook c2 wins the knight. So that's why I played knight a5, and now king d5 is a nice move because I'm controlling all these squares, and the knight wants to come to these squares to run away. So after this, he played knight b3. If he plays knight b7, I just play rook a2, followed by rook a7 and rook d7, for example. Knight d8, rook a7, and something like king g5, rook d7, the knight is lost. So that's why he came to this side of the board, knight b3, but now rook b2, knight c1 only move, and now I can't be, okay, too, I'm not sure what the word is, but too calm about it. Okay, I don't know. Because if I play king d4, I'm actually drawing the game to king f3, and the knight is going to e2. So I can't be too casual, that was the word I was looking for, and I played queen e4 and my opponent resigned. What's happening is that, for example, king g3, king e3, okay, king g4 and king d2, and the knight is lost. So that was round 3, and it was a win for me, a very nice win. I was lost on the beginning of the game, but I managed to come back, and with some tactics I eventually won on the middle game and the end game. I think I outplayed my opponent on the middle game and the end game, while, well, he definitely outplayed me in the opening. So that was a nice game. Eventually I scored 16-7. I think I just lost one game in this tournament, and if you want to see the last game, you can see my first video on my best chess games. Thank you.